The movie begins by showing us a dark future in 2023 where most of the cities on Earth have been destroyed. Mutants and the people who dared to help them were experiencing loss and suffering, fighting an enemy that they could not defeat. In an isolated institute, a group of X-Men fight against large robots known as Sentinels in the hopes of changing the future by sending Bishop's consciousness a few days into the past so he could warn the X-Men about the upcoming attack. These robots were made to hunt and kill anyone who was a mutant, and during the fight, most of them were killed off by the Sentinels, but Kitty managed to send Bishop back just in the nick of time, and when she succeeds, the future is changed. Having escaped, Storm, Logan, Magneto, and Professor X fly to a temple in a remote location in their private plane and are greeted by the rest of the group. As they gather together, Kitty explains how they've been avoiding the Sentinel attacks by sending Bishop's consciousness back to warn them each time. Charles explains that the Sentinel program was originally conceived by a man named as Dr. Bolivar, who was the world's leading weapons designer who'd secretly begun experimenting on mutants to fuel his research. And when Raven found out what the man was doing, she'd assassinated him, and although she thought that she saved mutants, her actions did not have the desired outcome as it drove the government to continue Bolivar's work. Raven was then captured and tortured, and in her DNA, they found the secrets of her abilities, which gave the government the key to create a weapon that could adapt to any mutant's power. And in less than 50 years, the machines that destroyed so many mutants were created. This all began in 1973 when Raven killed the Doctor, so Charles wants to travel back in time to stop her, avoiding the war with humans. Kitty is concerned that she can only send consciousness back a couple of weeks but not decades, and even though Charles has a powerful mind, he would not be able to survive the trip. Logan suggested they might send him because of his ability to heal quickly, and Charles tells Wolverine, aka Logan, to find him in Magneto in 1973 and convince him of the dark future that awaited them if they don't stop Raven. Before she sends him to the past, Kitty explains that once he wakes up there, it would be like the last 50 years didn't happen, and Wolverine would be the only one who remembers it. She then tells him that they need to hurry before the Sentinels find them and that this was their only chance of survival. Wolverine wakes up in 1973 in the mind of his younger self, naked next to the boss's daughter. Three men barge in threatening to kill him for what he had done, but he manages to disarm them all, stealing their car keys. In Washington, Dr. Bolivar was having a meeting with government officials, trying to get authorization to get his Sentinel program up and running. Although acknowledging his work, the officials don't think mutants are a threat to their existence and don't give him the approval to continue. In a different part of the world, Raven infiltrates a camp in Saigon by impersonating a military officer. There she finds a quarantined area where they keep mutant soldiers who'd been shipped out to war. And instead of sending them back home, she finds out that the military was giving the mutants to Dr. Bolivar for further experimentation. Raven frees the mutants and sends them out to the plane so they can be transported home safely. Back in the US, Wolverine drives to the X-Mansion and meets Beast, who tells him that the school has been closed for years due to the Vietnam War. After a brief altercation with Beast, who wanted Wolverine to leave their property, Wolverine meets a very drunk and careless Charles. Wolverine explains that he was sent from the future, but Charles has a very hard time believing him. He then convinces the professor that he was telling the truth by mentioning private information that Charles hadn't told anyone yet. He then explains that he needs to stop Raven from assassinating the Doctor. Although Wolverine explains the direness of the situation, Charles is now a broken man who is not willing to help. And after he goes up to his study, Beast tells Wolverine that the professor had given up, using a serum that would allow him to walk but prevent him from using his powers. He'd also turned to alcohol after losing everything that he cared about. Later, Charles changes his mind and agrees to help Wolverine in hopes of seeing Raven again. Wolverine knows that they'll have to break Magneto out of prison, where he had been imprisoned for trying to assassinate JFK. Magneto was being kept in a room 100 floors underground that was purely built from concrete. Realizing that breaking in would be impossible, the three drive out to find a mutant with the ability to travel at high speed. Living in his mom's basement, the group find Peter, who seems to be interested in helping them break into the Pentagon. At the Trask Industry facility, Raven breaks into Dr. Bolivar's office and finds all the files that he'd been keeping on mutants who had died during his experiments. Impersonating the Doctor, he asks his secretary to type out his itinerary for the convention in France, which he was attending to convince high officials to continue his work. After driving to Washington, Charles and the others pretend to be a group of visitors and join a tour group who were visiting the Pentagon. Peter manages to find Magneto in his cell after impersonating one of the guards, who was headed down to bring the prisoner some food. Charles and Wolverine create a distraction while Peter gets Magneto, and on their way out, the group is stopped by a lot of guards who threaten to shoot them, but Peter uses his super speed to incapacitate them all. Magneto and the others escape and head to the airport, where Charles' private plane was waiting for them, and in the plane, Wolverine explains to Magneto that he and Charles were the ones that sent him from the future. On the way to Paris, Charles yells at his old friend, saying that he abandoned him after he took Raven away. Angry, Magneto starts mentioning the names of the mutants' friends that he'd lost, accusing Charles of not helping them in the past. Magneto tells Charles that he was the one who abandoned all of the mutants by hiding away when they needed him most. Later, Magneto tries to make amends with Charles by offering a game of chess, which Charles declines. The two speak about Raven and how they must stop her before she kills the Doctor, and Magneto apologizes for everything that he made his friend go through and for leaving him. In Paris, a group of dignitaries are gathered together to sign the peace treaty, and Dr. Bolivar arrives at the meeting hall and congratulates the officials, but explains that there's a new threat that they need to be concerned about. Bolivar presents his Sentinel idea to the group, explaining that his technology would be able to identify the gene that makes mutants special, and as a demonstration he turns it on and is surprised when the machine indicates that there's a mutant in the room. Realizing her disguise was compromised, Raven changes back into herself and attacks the guards that were trying to capture her. Before she could shoot Bolivar, Charles's convoy arrives, stopping her from killing the Doctor, and Magneto tries to shoot Raven, saying that the mutant race would never be safe as long as she was out there. Raven jumps out of the window right before Magneto shoots, hitting her leg. Magneto follows her out into the staring crowd, catching her before she could get far. But before he could kill her, Beast attacks him, giving her enough time to run away. After experiencing flashbacks of his past, Wolverine's mind slips back, and he's transformed back to his present self for a few minutes. By the time his mind returns, Raven had escaped, and Magneto was going after her. At the White House, the president and his officers were shocked by the footage that they were seeing of the mutants in Paris, and Dr. Bolivar convinces the president to see the prototypes of the Sentinels, using the hysteria to his advantage. Back in the streets of Paris, Raven finds Magneto walking and asks him why he tried to kill her. He explains what could happen to all mutants if Dr. Bolivar gets his hand on her DNA, but he tells her that everything was too late because they already acquired her blood from the street. He then goes on to tell her that they need to strike now while they still have the upper hand, and Raven makes sure that Magneto understands that she's not interested in working with him before she leaves him on the street. At the X-Mansion, Charles struggles with the loss of his leg as the serum wears off and his powers return. Knowing that he would need his powers, Charles decides not to use the medication, and he tries to use Cerebro to find Raven, but his mind was too weak to work the machine. Charles feels broken and cannot use his powers the way he wanted to, and Wolverine tells him to go through his mind, helping him contact with his older self so he can have hope again. Charles feels whole again after speaking to his future self, and he has the ability to reach out to Raven with his mind, and he asks her to come home so they can deal with the impending threat together. He tells her that the path that she was following would bring them nothing but death and destruction, but Raven was not interested in listening to Charles and boards a plane to Washington. Charles realizes that she's going there to kill Dr. Bolivar, and he wants to believe in Raven and plans to show her the right path. Charles, Beast, and Wolverine head to Washington where a ceremony was taking place in the White House courtyard, and the president was ready to reveal the Sentinel prototypes. The crowd cheers as the robots are revealed, happy to hear that they have a defense system against the mutant threat. Taking matters into his own hands, Magneto is also headed to Washington to stop the ceremony. He floats an entire stadium to the White House while simultaneously hijacking the system of the robots. He then uses the new Sentinels to attack the people attending the ceremony, creating mass chaos. Magneto then ties up Wolverine with steel rods and throws them into a river. Fearing for their safety, the Secret Service agents take the president, Dr. Bolivar, and the high officials into the White House bunker, unaware that Raven was impersonating an agent and was amongst them. With a tremendous crash, Magneto drops the stadium upon the White House, erecting a wall that separated him from any police. Utilizing the robots, he unleashes a relentless assault on anyone who dared to oppose him, clearing his path with ruthless efficiency. Unyielding in his determination, Magneto then summons his immense strength to drag out the hidden bunker beneath the White House, exposing its occupants. As the chaos unfolded, Magneto seizes the moment, ensuring that all eyes were fixed on him, and standing amidst the wreckage, he delivers a speech that would be broadcast around the world, saying that mutants were the future of the human race. He reminded humanity that their fear toward mutants was not unfounded, because what they were witnessing now was only the tip of the iceberg. He then calls out to mutant brothers and sisters to come out of hiding and stand with him, and Raven changes herself into the president and impersonates him, and asks Magneto to kill her and spare the rest of the people. When one of the machines tries to attack him, Magneto is distracted, giving Raven enough time to shoot him in the neck, making sure that she didn't hit anything vital. Raven uses the same gun to try and shoot Dr. Bolivar, but Charles gets in her head and stops her, telling her to choose a better path. And convinced by her old dear friend, Raven drops the gun. In the future, the remaining X-Men were discovered by the Sentinels while hiding in the mountains. They were under attack and in danger, and to protect his friends, Magneto closes off the entrance to their hiding place, hoping to buy Wolverine some time to finish his important task. Unfortunately, the Sentinels were too powerful, and one by one, the X-Men were defeated and killed. And just when it seemed like Charles and Kitty were about to meet the same fate, something extraordinary happened, and the future suddenly changed, and the versions of Charles and Kitty who'd fought in the war vanish as they've never existed. Back in 1973, Charles and Beast watch as Magneto and Raven leave the place before Charles releases the government's official mind. Wolverine wakes up in a different and better future where the X school was open and teaching. He walks around the hallway, seeing everyone who fought with him in the war safe and happy. Wolverine meets Charles in his study, who reads his mind and realizes everything that happened, and Charles welcomes his friend back, telling him that they have a lot of catching up to do. He tells Wolverine that after they fished out his body from the river, Raven was deemed a hero after saving the president and the cabinet, and Dr. Bolivar was arrested as the government found out that he was selling state secrets and his program was cancelled, and following the events, mutants were allowed to exist among humans in peace.